Today's webinar is just a short 20 minutes just to go through some of the visibility challenges that we see in Southeast Asia and hopefully invoke some provocative thought. From a Yogi perspective, and when we look at Southeast Asia road transport, there's sort of 5 characteristics we see that make this environment or this region challenging. Obviously, from a global perspective, Europe, America or North America, Australia, New Zealand and Southeast Asia all have different characteristics. But when we look at our Southeast Asia road freight customers and their requirements, this is typically what we encounter in broad topics. We see highly fragmented carrier ecosystems. And even within that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, there's carriers that have a lot of technology and there's carriers that have limited technology. Obviously, in this region as well, there's a lot of cross-border requirements and infrastructure, and obviously that can cause delays or it can cause additional logistical constraints when you're moving first mile and last mile road freight in Southeast Asia. Language is a huge thing. Obviously, a lot of different languages in the Southeast Asia region, which can contribute to whether it's communication challenges or delays or paperwork translation issues. I know in our product, we have obviously multi-language capability on both the platform and the driver app. There's regulatory fragmentation in the region, and there's very much a large portion of freight that still moves on very manual and paper-based systems. Those are still very dominant, particularly in the low-tech carrier space. So this complexity really is what we see when we talk to our customers and we talk to prospective customers or even just industry participants in this space. So a little bit about Yogi and what we do. We like to consider ourselves creators of world-class logistics technology. We have 2 products. One is what we call TCMS, which is a transport carrier management system. TCMS is all about sitting between a shipper or between a freight forwarder and their customers and being able to manage their entire carrier network, whether those carriers have a high-tech environment or a low-tech environment. But it's about giving our customers a single experience. And when we talk to a lot of participants in this industry, they're often juggling multiple carriers that have varying degrees of technology. Our other product is Mosaic, which is commercially available next year, which is a freight forwarding and customs platform. But today, we're really focused on that Southeast Asia road transport requirement. So let's talk about, if we know what the challenges are in this environment, let's talk about what it looks like operationally when our customers or participants in this space deal with high-tech carriers. Well, when you deal with a high-tech carrier, whether that's a Seva or a Schenker or Toll Global Forwarding handling your road freight, they often have a lot of integration capabilities. That's obviously a positive. They obviously have a lot of tracking portals and tech behind that. They often have larger networks, and generally you will have faster response times from those high-tech carriers. It is, though, challenging to then manage multiple integrations with those carriers if you want to integrate with them to obviously improve data efficiencies and timeliness and accuracy and reliability. You can have multiple processes that your own users have to follow to deal with those high-tech carriers. That can also make it harder to switch. If you go through contract negotiations or you want to change carrier partners, it can be an amount of effort that has to be applied to switch those, especially if you've got integrations with them, which can result in a higher cost of implementation. And you end up with multiple user experiences. I was speaking to a customer in Singapore probably a couple of months back, and their own customer portal actually directs their customers to their carrier partner portal. So the customers end up with multiple experiences as well. When you have a transport carrier management system that can sit between yourself and your carrier partners, you get that single integration point. Now, the advantages there are pretty significant, particularly around cybersecurity risk. If your IT team only has to manage a single point of contact, that's a single point of cybersecurity risk that you don't have to worry about 10 or 12 different connections, because your carrier management system at the back end is what pushes into your high-tech carriers. It also means you get a single portal to do all of your tracking from, which means you reduce your training costs. It means if you've got 11 countries in the region, all of your users have the same experience, and that's going to reduce your cost of training across that. Okay, you can still access your larger networks with your high-tech carriers. You can still get real-time data back because those carriers now feed into your carrier management system. It can be easier to switch providers because your users don't need to change experience. Your carriers just plug into the back of your carrier management system, which results in a lower implementation cost And again, that single user experience for not only your own users, but importantly for customers, because a modern carrier management system will enable tracking links to go out to your customers that provide a white labeled experience. Now, if we compare and contrast the high-tech carriers to what experience you get operationally with low-tech carriers, I mean, you get niche specializations. Often your low-tech carriers are smaller operators and can be a little bit more niche. You do tend to have personal relationships with them as well. And you often, depending on the size of you as a shipper or a forwarder, will have more leverage over those carrier partners. But as our customers tell us, you do get slower response time. You can have delayed milestone POD updates, multiple user experiences, WhatsApp, SMS, phone calls. We have one customer, or sorry, potential customer that I'm talking to, where they showed us a WhatsApp group that had about 70 participants in it, and they were coordinating freight moves through this WhatsApp group that had about 70 participants on it. It was very hard to keep track of. You can have a lower end customer experience because that limited amount of milestones coming back to your platform can really make it a challenge for those customers to get that real-time visibility. And don't forget that the people you're dealing with, you might be in a B2B relationship, business to business relationship, but they also have their own environments where they work in a business to consumer environment, and they're purchasing things online, whether it's Amazon or eBay, and they're used to real-time data. And they often get frustrated when they can't get that in their B2B environments as well. And then one of the things I find most frustrating is you end up with data outside of your core operating system, as opposed to your integrated operating system or your ERP, which allows powerful decisions across the business units. Now, if you look at what happens when you have a transport carrier management system with your low-tech carriers, you can still have your niche specializations, you can still have your personal relationships, but you get faster response times. You get the milestones and POD updates. You get that single user experience and higher customer service, and data gets back to your core operating system. We've also had customers that we've worked with that get improved cash flow cycles because they can get PODs to their customers faster, right? We've got customers that actually work with their carriers that actually improve the payment terms to their carriers by getting data back through a transport carrier management system. So we know what the 5 characteristics or the challenges are we face, and we know what it's like dealing with low-tech and high-tech carriers. And then we've got the participants that operate in this space. You've got your shippers or your BCOs that might work with your LSPs or have external warehouses that have carrier partners, and then you have your receivers. And you combine the complexities that we talked about at the start, and you combine the low-tech and the high-tech carriers, and then you've got the different participants, and it can really lead to a lot of unpredictable and unreliable freight movements. And when we talk about, closing the gap in land transport or overcoming the challenges in the Southeast Asia, it's all of these things together. The challenges, the degree of tech between different carriers, and then managing the participants as well and their expectations and overcoming all of those difficult challenges. Now, I've done plenty of demos in my time, and there's some participants on this webinar who I've demoed to previously. And I've never once had a scenario where people don't see the value of a transport carrier management system. But often what happens is there's a lack of action, right? And I want to sort of get towards like what's the cost of doing nothing, right? And why do people do nothing, right, about this? There's a lot of people on this call that I know, and I know personally, and they're very intelligent. They can see the value, but why does that not translate into action for your businesses? And I'm polling our own internal team and our sales team and our customer care team. It's these type of things that we see quite often. It's easier to do nothing, right? It's easier to maintain the status quo, right? If your customer service is dropping, it's easier to put a new body in customer service and implement them into a manual system, right? Because that's what you're used to doing, right? It does work, right? It is fragmented, but there are invisible costs which rise, right? The labor cost rises, and it becomes increasingly difficult to deliver service excellence, particularly if you want to scale up, right? And then you can do umpteen calculations to try and translate, employee costs into service costs as well. Probably one of the most important ones or touchy ones we get to is change brings risk, right? And often somebody needs to be the champion, and there can be a tendency to not want to stick your head out. I'm hoping that that sort of analogy sort of translates. But if you can see the value in managing or better managing last mile and gaining the visibility and gaining the real-time updates and delivering higher levels of customer service, then it's a risk to change the status quo because you know the status quo works. If you think about an international supply chain move, in the middle mile, you've got air freight and sea freight typically, right? And there's a lot smaller number of carriers in that space, and it's easier to manage often. And softwares are very geared up for that, right? They're very geared up with their integrations, whether it's IATA messaging or FWB FHLs or messaging to your ocean carriers. But when you expand into that first mile and last mile area, not only does it amplify the number of participants and carrier partners and challenges around all the things we talked about on the first slide with languages and so forth, but it also touches your customers, right? And the challenge there and the risk there is the penalties are immediate, right? If you disrupt a customer's delivery at the final mile, it's more painful than telling a customer a vessel was delayed 3 or 4 hours, right? So change takes courage and it takes vision and it takes a team, but inaction is free. And do you know who does love your inaction? It's your competitors. I enjoy working with customers that have that vision and have that courage, right? And that's what it takes to implement, a solution in this space. Another reason for doing nothing is the change seems too big. My CEO and I were in Melbourne in Australia probably about a month ago, and we were talking to a customer, and one person sort of commented they wanted everything or nothing, right? But when you put it like that, it's just a behemoth and becomes impossibly difficult to manage or actually see how you could even implement that. So, using an old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. And I haven't really found a company that's ever been able to implement something in one go, right? Because your trucks are going to keep moving, the planes are going to keep coming, the boats are going to keep coming. So you need to manage that change, and that comes down to the change management. Right? There's not a project in the world that hasn't happened that doesn't involve an amount of change management, and a change management process that disrupts or affects your customers through your carrier partners is obviously important, and it needs to be managed. At Yogi, we have a customer care team who works very closely to implement with our customers, and we take the approach that we look at logical segments of their business, whether that's a region, whether that's a facility, or whether it's a particular carrier partner to work with along the implementation path. And then the last one is company-wide buy-in. Right? It's easy enough to see the value of change, but it needs to be supported throughout the business because it will get bumpy and it will get rocky. It can get uncomfortable, right? Especially as you're going through that transition, right? We often use the phrase, we want to implement bottom up, right? We need to make sure that the users are empowered. At Yogi, when we develop tech, we sort of use the term human first technology, right? So when we implement, you've got to think about the people that are going to use the system and what they need, but it has to be supported top down, right? So implement bottom up and change top down is incredibly important. Now, we do this in our lives, but we don't do it in business. And I'm just going to draw a tangent to a gentleman called Jason Chi, who was a Singapore Navy sailor who, in a terrible accident, lost 2 of his legs, 1 arm and 3 fingers on another one. But he didn't give up, right? He had the courage and the vision to sort of not do nothing, if you like, and overcame all the odds. And I draw this tangent because 1, it's an incredibly inspirational story, but 2, we do things in our lives that we don't do in business. We'll have the courage in our own personal lives, but when it comes to business, it can be a little bit more challenging. And I encourage everyone to have the courage to change in that space. Right? So, just to leave you with a few takeaways, and then we'll get on to some Q&A. It's about thinking about will you drive the change or stay stuck with the status quo, right? So tech is not the tangle, right? And even in my previous lives before I was at Yogi, tech is very often not the challenge, right? It's the habits, the politics, it's the fear, right? It's fragmented partners. It's that causes it. There's a human side to change that has to happen. Your transport operations don't need more tools. They need ones that are fit for purpose. They don't need layers and layers and layers. They need a fit for purpose tool that's capable of dealing with high-tech carriers, dealing with low-tech carriers, and overcoming those challenges and joining the market participants that we mentioned in this presentation or webinar, sorry. And visibility, think of it like a currency, right? if you think of visibility like a currency that you need to improve, right, and make sure that those customers have those real-time updates. And I'm very passionate about this because the customers you're serving, they have all sorts of other B2C relationships and they're used to real-time data, right? And we need to make that more real-time inside of our B2B environments. And change is obviously the hardest road, right? It's about a whole team change mindset. A couple of our customers, just to highlight that, I want to sort of call out these customers as high performance. A company called APP we have, who is in Indonesia. They have at any one time over 200 contracted carriers and about 1,600 drivers running through a transport carrier management system. And they came from an entirely paper-based system, WhatsApp, SMSs, with zero visibility of where their vehicles are. Right, they implemented a carrier management system to get that control, get that visibility, and more importantly, get the data back into their core operating system, which is a huge benefit. Like the data is what is valuable. Right? The data is where it allows you to make decisions. The data allows you to measure things. They had the courage to do the change. It was hard, especially in that type of a market with so many different facilities and carrier partners. But they had the courage and the vision to do that. KBC is a customer of ours in Malaysia. They're an industrial electrical supplies company. They actually achieved last month, 100% delivery completion rate through their carrier management system. And again, all that data flows back to their customers and their ability to service their customers. Markham it's a UPS company, but they operate in Australia and they have some particular healthcare requirements. All of these systems, all these companies had the courage and the vision and went through the change management and overcame those challenges from fragmented systems and communication gaps, regulations, paper-based systems to become unified. Have a driver app. Like Yogi, for not to make this sound too salesy, but our platform is two-sided. When you push data through our carrier management system, it either integrates into your high-tech carriers and receives data back, or your low-tech carriers can actually use at the back end of our platform to execute and plan their deliveries and provide their drivers a free app as well to get that digitization into that last mile, which is hugely important. And then again, seamless integration, single point of contact, and single point of cybersecurity risk, and then you start to get a lot of insights and automations out of that. So I know this is a short session because I know everyone's time is valuable. Let's just finish up with a couple of questions. I have one question. So is Yosi positioned in the Southeast Asia APAC market only, or do you have do we have the capability to deploy in Europe or South America? Yes. Short answer is we do. The platform works globally. Our bigger challenge is support for those time zones because we have offices in Singapore and Australia. Look, in the background, full disclosure, we use Google Maps, as a lot of transport management systems do. So if you have an internet connection, you can absolutely use Yogi and TC in Europe or South America. I will clearly state on this call, we are not a TMS. We're not interested in managing heavy vehicle laws or driver fatigue or those type of things. It's a carrier management system that allows either our shipper customers or freight forwarder customers to manage entire carrier networks. Hopefully that answers. Does the OG platform integrate also express, parcel, air and ocean freight modes, or purely road only? Look, I'd say purely road only. We can integrate with anything, though, because ultimately integrations are just the translations of two different systems' data. So integrations is not an issue. We have publicly available APIs. Some customers build their own APIs using our tools. Some customers get us to build it for them. But yes, we can integrate. Our Mosaic product is an execution platform for freight forwarders and international customs brokers that will integrate with our TCMS last mile. I'm sure you probably could jam, ocean freight onto TCMS, but that's not what it's designed for. It's designed for that first mile, last mile road movements. Hopefully that answered your questions. And that's taken up about 20 minutes. I'm more than happy to stick around if anyone has any other questions. Otherwise, we'll probably call it a day. But just how does it improve operational efficiency? So sorry, someone just typed up, how does it improve operational efficiency? So we can automate a lot of behaviors, right? We can automate the sending of data to what we call your carrier partners, and we automate the flow of data back to your main system. And we also give planners the tools to actually plan and execute their movements. So we take time back, or we flush out capacity back from the planners in things they would normally have done manually otherwise. Additionally, one of the huge things that people often overlook is the transport planners and allocators don't need to be interrupted by customer service teams. Customer service teams can have access to a carrier management system and track things themselves without the need to chase up transport. Excellent. Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for joining. I know this was short. We wanted to make it short so we didn't encroach on people's valuable time. There's a QR code on the screen if you'd like to get more information. A lot of you probably already have my email address, or there is an email address on the screen there if you'd like more information. But thank you for spending time with us and talking about the road freight challenges in Southeast Asia. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.